Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
There are very few openings to modern animated TV shows that are as iconic as Avatar: The Last Airbender. Other than SpongeBob SquarePants, it was Nickelodeon's biggest and most acclaimed series that set a new standard for television animation. It was one of those rare gems that hit every note correctly to create an epic journey about not just a bunch of kids, but an entire world where people know the ancient art of manipulating the elements, all packaged with unforgettably complex and relatable characters, animation that took inspiration from anime to take its medium to the next level, and a story that is both intense and engaging from Aang's discovery to actually having a proper conclusion. It's one of the most revolutionary animated series that is beloved by millions around the world. However, much like many things in our modern culture, that love can also come with a dark side. Nowadays, there's been an increasing amount of projects that have been attacked Fire Nation style by being accused of being an Avatar ripoff. Sure, taking the elements of others and claiming them as your own is one thing, but this is a case where fans go ballistic if they see any form of similarity to the series, rather it be with the art style or the concept, and treat it a bit like they did with that disastrous Shyamalan movie.
I get the criticism of completely ripping off someone else, or that there would be that complete lack of originality. But there is still that major difference between sharing similarities and ripping someone off. And the real problem is that there are still many people out there who can't actually tell the difference, where they would immediately assume the worst if they notice some similarities to another project, and they would go and think that that would be the right for them to say that this thing is a ripoff. It really is a major issue in terms of giving criticism. However, how about we take this particular situation and flip that upside down? Imagine if there is a situation where you actually have a cartoon that bears a whole lot of similarities to Avatar: The Last Airbender, yet that cartoon was released before Avatar: The Last Airbender. Would it make Avatar the bad one in this case because that is actually ripping off that cartoon? And if you don't believe me, then take a look at Xiaolin Showdown.
Released just 2 years before The Last Airbender, the more you look at both Xiaolin and Avatar, the more the comparisons become apparent. It's an animated series with prominent Asian theming, it stars a group of kids that are the Chosen One archetypes, it plays a lot with mythology, the main character is a bald-headed boy with a signature marking on his forehead, and it contains a strong amount of action with a hint of comedy. Got any excuses for that, Nick? Looks like the Avatar tried to vanish his secret as well when the world needed him most.
The universe just loves proving me wrong, doesn't it?
Okay, in all seriousness, Xiaolin Showdown was a series created by Christy Hui at Warner Bros. Animation, who wanted to make a show that would be a fusion between Eastern and Western aesthetics, taking the art style and the philosophies that are commonplace in the East and the type of characters and humor that are regularly found in the West so they could be combined into a series that highlight the best of both cultures. The result when the show first aired in 2003 was the biggest series on Kids WB and was even at one point the biggest Saturday morning cartoon. Later turned into a major franchise of its time with video games, a trading card game, and even winning an Emmy for sound editing. At a time when Kids WB was all about presenting famous animes like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! To American audiences, Omi and his crew knew how to fit in and be one of the block's biggest stars alongside Ash and Yugi.
And that means striving for and obtaining perfection.
It was the series that defined Kids WB's later years, where they were once exclusively the home of new Warner Bros. Cartoons such as Animaniacs and the DC superheroes. They later gradually become the gateway to anime for Western audiences, where not only did they provide a whole bunch of familiar Japanese properties, but they also had some American-made animated series that have some of that Japanese anime-like influences in order to go and create a novel vision, or what was a novel vision at that time, that would later go on to define the medium in both streaming and television. But Considering that nowadays we are used to seeing those American-made shows that have some of that anime influence, what is it about this series in particular that makes its style stand out?
For starters, one thing I can immediately say is that one of the show's greatest strengths is the world building. You see, this is all about these young monks from different parts of the world called the Dragon Warriors who have to train and learn from their mistakes in order to fight against the forces of evil. At the same time, in almost every episode, they have to retrieve a Shen Gon Wu, an ancient artifact that grants the user a unique special power, like the Orb of Tournami can unleash an unlimited amount of water, the Golden Tiger Claws can teleport them to wherever they want, and the Shroud of Shadows can turn them invisible. And if two people simultaneously claim a Shen Gon Wu, that's when they have to do a Xiaolin Showdown, a challenge of the caller's choosing where the two must compete in order to win the Wu, along with betting one of their own to raise up the stakes. Seems like there's a lot of rules it has to follow, especially with all the different Shen Gon Wu that it had to keep on adding after each episode. Well, what makes the world building so great is that it has a very good memory. Not only could it develop elements and give it life of their own by presenting how it could play in the hands of good and evil, but they keep recycling plot points, characters, and moments from previous episodes so that they could return them with a more prominent role. It allows each episode to feel important and encourages audiences to pay closer attention to what they introduce next, adding the possibility that they could be vital for next time. A smart tactic to make the series more engaging. It also makes the world around the Dragon Warriors more immersive and believable. The fact that they don't take most of their materials for granted by just throwing them away as one-offs emphasizes the journey of how each step they take, and with every Shen Gon Wu they claim or lost does have some long-term consequences. Rather if they are for better or for worse is up to how the monks deal with the situation.
While we should endeavor to win all the Shen Gon Wu, it is not the end of life as we know it if we occasionally lose one. So, Omi, which Shen Gon Wu did you lose?
The heart of Zhang.
However, as great as the world is to go on this epic journey, the journey itself can be a bit messy. As much as I do admire the use of its materials and concepts in the writing, the way that the stories are told do get quickly repetitive. At least in my experience of binging all these episodes at once. It doesn't take long to catch that most of them follow a pattern. Here's the typical Xiaolin Showdown episode. They start with Master Feng telling the monks what they should learn, they go find a new Shen Gon Wu, a villain comes in to cause the conflict, they figure out a way to solve the problem by understanding the lesson, they face the villain again in a Xiaolin Showdown, and they usually end up winning the match and learn their lesson. Once you catch on the formula, it makes the episodes quickly predictable and it almost feels like watching the same episode, but in a different place with a different Shen Gon Wu and a different fashion style for Kimiko.
Excellent. Great ending and not too long. Dragged a little in the middle though.
Don't get too excited, Raimundo. Here comes the bad part.
Also, another thing that does get repetitive is how often the monks have to stop the end of the world. I get it, sometimes you gotta raise the stakes of the situation to show how intimidating their missions can be, and that could be fine for some special occasions like a season finale. But when it keeps raising the bar so often where Omi and the crew has to keep preventing the end of the world, it stops feeling like a big deal and becomes sounding like just another normal day at the temple. Oh, the whole world shall collapse now that evil is taking over? I'm sure the Dragon Warriors can take care of it easily, as usual.
Their evil forces could mean the end of the world.
Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, previously on Xiaolin Showdown.
The writing can be a give or take kind of situation. There is that one side of the show where it can feel very repetitive and a bit predictable as well, to the point where it feels like it's saying the same story again and again and again and again, and it's hard to even hide any surprises, especially when the conflict feels like it's starting to feel a bit of the same because it cannot think of anything that would be worse than the end of the world. But on the other hand, though, there is still that other side that I actually feel very admired by the way that it uses its materials and its concepts and keep on reusing them in a way that it helps make the world feel more engaging and more immersive, where it encourages its audience to go and pay attention to all these little details. And it feels like it has its own set of rules that it is very much disciplined to follow, much more so than I could say about most anime series out there. But even if my mindset and my thoughts on the writing is a bit mixed, and some could say I'm a bit hard on it, there is no doubt in my mind that when it comes to the animation, my thoughts are a lot more straightforward, and I think it's pretty much solid all around.
Like I said before, part of the Asian influence of the series is to give it a Chinese-inspired look, to have the animation be reminiscent to the flow of ancient Chinese art. And as a TV show with a strict budget, they have to keep the design simple. But thankfully, the show takes great advantage of the style's minimalism, really playing with lines and swirls to create the characters and give the backgrounds a look inspired by woodblock printing. Even if the influence is Chinese, in a way, the designs remind me of the works of American caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. It's not about the drawings themselves, but how the lines create the drawings. But it's not just China where the show has some inspiration. There is a bit of that style from Japan that can show up, mainly whenever the characters need to make a funny expression.
Angry? Me? I am not angry. I'm the least angry person I know!
But the true moments when the animation shines are during the action scenes. Yes, I was kind of harsh on the story, but it's noticeable that this is not the kind of show that primarily wants to tell this epic tale. If not that, then it's all about seeing the kids use special weapons and martial arts skills in order to take down bad guys, monsters, robots, and so much more. And with all the places around the world where the Shen Gon Wu are, the variety of villains they have to face and all the different types of Xiaolin Showdowns they must do, even not being afraid to get ridiculous with its challenges, the possibilities are just endless. And with all the different effects to emphasize the elements, it's noticeable that the series has a large amount of creativity, but mainly supplies it for the animation to think of all the different ideas they could do for all the fight scenes and the Xiaolin Showdowns. So if it's not for the journey of fighting against great evil, it's to check out how the Dragon Warriors use the Shen Gon Wu they have at hand to kick Jack Spicer's butt.
Need a little help there, partner?
No, there is only 5 of them. Hya! Huh! Hya! Hya!
But in order to have great action, you must also have great characters to root for in order to be more engaged with what is going on. It's not just about seeing a bunch of characters beat each other up. It's to see good take down evil and for the Shen Gon Wu to end up in the right hands. And when it comes to these characters in particular, I think it was Master Feng who actually said it best, maybe even a few times, that these characters in particular, they're only at their greatest when they are all working together.
Individually, the characters are not so great. They mostly have their own signature trait that they use in a continuous loop to the point that it can get on your nerves. Not all the time though, they have their moments when they are funny, but it's like they only supply the same type of jokes again and again and again and again. Omi was raised in the temple and trained to become a true dragon warrior by Master Feng for all his life and has an ego bigger than his own head. Raimundo is the hot-headed jock type from Rio de Janeiro, Kimiko is the tech geek girl from Tokyo, and Clay is the strong Texas cowboy who always slips in a metaphor every time he talks. Along with them is Dojo, the shape-shifting dragon that transports the dragon warriors whenever he senses a Shen Gon Wu revealing itself. Basically, he's just Mushu from Mulan, but voiced by Wayne Knight. But then again, he's Mushu from Mulan, but voiced by Wayne Knight. How is that not a great combo? With the sharp wit that he can deliver and has most of the best jokes of the show, I'd say he's the best standalone character of the series.
To eat rotten egg rolls once is difficult. To eat them twice is another thing.
What does that mean?
Who knows? Just do what I do. Smile and nod.
On the villain side, we got Jack Spicer, a wannabe evil genius whose punchline is that he's so bad at what he does and is so pathetic that even Dr. Doofenshmirtz would laugh at him. But of course, he can't do his evil deeds alone. which is why he mainly acts more like an assistant to Wuya, a 1500-year-old spirit who seeks to gather all the Shen Gon Wu in order to take over the world. And later on, her true physical form gets unleashed so she can let out all her powers and raise some dark questions. Like, should I have this much of a crush on a villain, or is this a sign that I'm into bad girls? I'll give them that the two are pretty solid antagonists for this show, but then as it continues, that's when it ends up becoming a case of too many cooks spoil the broth. By the second season, they introduce a new threat to the Dragon Warriors called Chase Young, who has different plans for world domination that doesn't include the Shen Gon Wu. And if that wasn't enough, they brought in another villain in the third season called Hannibal Roy Bean, who is said to be the one responsible for bringing Chase to the dark side. By that point, that's when the enemies become so convoluted for their own good that they end up spending more time sabotaging each other and are each other's biggest obstacle more than the Dragon Warriors.
Oh, so much crisscrossing. This proves there's truly no honor among thieves.
But again, on their own, they can be problematic. But as Master Feng said it best,
Only one would rise, but not until you worked together as one.
and that's why, other than the action, it's the characters that make the series so engaging to watch because of the dynamic that they feed off of each other. You don't watch this for just Omi, Rai, Kimiko, or Clay. You watch how these different personalities can clash, but are able to put their differences aside in order to work together. They eventually grow to become a family, and as their skills become stronger, so is their bond to ensure that they can only be at their best when they are a team. So along with the action, it also supplies some good heart to help follow the gang in their adventure. Also, it's worth mentioning that the show has some solid voice acting, all coming from the usual LA voice actors whose fame is from their extensive filmography. You know the ones, including the already mentioned Wayne Knight. You got Tara Strong, Tom Kenny, Gray Delisle, Jeff Bennett, Jason Marsden, Maurice LaMarche, and more. Basically, it's the actors you expect to do a good voiceover job, and they fairly do so here.
So I guess it's back to the same old, huh?
Yep. Training
Finding Shen Gon Wu.
and stopping evil wherever it may rise.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
You could say that the show is a lot like the Dragon Warriors themselves. When taking the individual elements on their own, they have problems, and I do mean a lot of problems, to the point that it would end up making the series fail at what it wants to try to do. But then again, I will say that the show also has a lot of great elements that I would even go as far as say that it actually does better than most other animated shows out there. And when all these elements actually do work together, that's when the series truly shines, and that's when it proves why it actually was, at one point, the biggest show on Kids WB. But it's kind of strange, don't you think? The fact that this was once considered the Saturday morning champion, and yet nowadays, not many people really talk much about it, or we don't see Warner Brothers taking pride on Xiaolin Showdown. So why is it that Omi's legacy did not really last that long after the series?
Don't get me wrong, the series had a really good run with 3 seasons and a total of 52 episodes. But the reason why Xiaolin Showdown kind of faded from the public's eye is because it kind of went down with Kids WB. In 2006, as the show was ending, the block moved to the CW, and by time, that never worked out and the Kids WB that many grew up with died out, while the big WB showed no interest whatsoever in keeping the spirit of Xiaolin alive. There was at one point in 2013 when they made a sequel series called Xiaolin Chronicles that aired on Disney XD. But there was no hiding that it was not the same show as before. Tara Strong and Jennifer Hale were the only actors who came back, while the rest couldn't make it due to either time or the budget wouldn't allow it. They had to change the names of all the attacks and the Shen Gon Wu, and the show only lasted half as long as the original series with just 1 season. While the last 6 episodes didn't even get a chance to air on TV and had to wait until a couple of years later when it moved to Netflix. It had no chance to get to the levels of its predecessor, and honestly, that was quite a tough act to follow. Xiaolin Showdown may have its problems with one-dimensional characters that can get annoying and often having a repetitive story, but when it has its focus, its flaws get overshadowed by presenting itself as an artistic and action-packed series, filled with awesome and creative fight scenes, a lot of heart to connect with the characters, enjoyable voice acting, great world building and reusing elements from past episodes, and nice animation that stays true to the ancient Chinese style. And if you want to see the show at its best, or what I consider my favorite episodes, then I say to check out the 4-part story arc between episodes 12 and 15, where they really take advantage of the character dynamics and make the challenge feel at its peak as they first face Wuya in her true form. If you're a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, into ancient Chinese culture, or just a fan of action shows, then this one is worth a watch if you get a chance to catch it. It was honestly tough to find the right rating for this one, but I'm gonna do something different and give this one a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like calling this a 3 out of 4 star series is perfect to describe this.
But with all that said and done, do I actually believe that Avatar: The Last Airbender is a Xiaolin Showdown ripoff? Of course not! Accusing Avatar of that is as weak of an argument as saying that Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon is a ripoff of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, I could go on and on about that argument, but honestly, I think it would be much easier to just go and point to CellSpec's video and recommend you to go and check that one out. Seriously, she actually did an amazing job pointing out the problems of that argument. But I will say that if there is a connection that I would have to make in terms of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Xiaolin Showdown, then I would view Xiaolin Showdown more as a prototype to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, even if Omi didn't know it, he was setting the standard of what would be to come in terms of the future of animation and preparing audiences for that epic moment for the perfect combination of animation, ancient Asian culture and mythology, and lots of exciting action.
I don't know about you, but I think he makes this stuff up as he goes along.